Morning again to everyone. The third day of this conference, and this morning we are starting with a plenary interactive panel session. Before I hand over to Drupad, who will tell you a little bit more about the content of this session, let me explain to you about the process, the format of the session. Interactive panel means that the chair will introduce the panel members and there will be one keynote speech, followed by four comments or 4 questions answered by the other panel members. And this will all be fairly brief. And then because after that we would again like to have as much interaction with you, the participants, as possible. So the way that we have thought to do that today is to give you a little bit of reflection time after the panel has completed their comments. Give you a little bit of reflection time so that you can also discuss with your neighbors. Then you can write your questions or comments on cards, and then we will go in and ask you to come up with a few comments and questions for the panel. We would like to also give more room today for the young people in the audience, so we will make sure that that also happens, but we definitely encourage and invite the young people to come with some nice comments and questions. After that, there will be some closing remarks, and that's then the end of this session for this morning until the tea break. With that, I'm very happy to hand over to Drupad Chowdhury, who is the Regional Program Manager for the Adaptation to Change program at ICIMOD. Drupad.
Thank you, Miriam. Good morning once again to all. How we can enhance compatibility. Compatibility which connects the National Adaptation Plans with the global strategies, the initiatives which are being taken by different agencies at the global level. Now, what is very clear is that there is global recognition that there is climate change and the impacts are coming in on that. The global initiatives which have been taken by different agencies, in particular, the UN Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, and they have set in process several initiatives, several programs which are there. These are also supported by other agencies like the UNDP and UNEP to support national adaptation programs. At the national level, we know in each of the countries, the nations are trying to get their adaptation plans together. There have been the national action plans in different countries. However, there is still a gap when you think about the communities down at the grassroots level. And this session, what we would try to do is, one, try and give an idea of what are the initiatives at the global and at the national levels, but also look at some of the challenges which are being faced in terms of ensuring that these efforts are helping communities to enhance their adaptive capacities. Now, we are not going to look only at the challenges. We also hope that the panels will be able to give us some solutions and how to go about and give us some directions. That would be the main thrust of the whole session today. Now, it's a pleasure for me to introduce the chair. The chair of this session is Mr. Zafar Hassan Reza from Pakistan. Mr. Reza has been with the Civil Services of Pakistan, which he joined in 1982, and since then has been working in different ministries, more focusing on the finance part of it. So therefore, given the topic of this session, I think we have a very able chair who would be able to bring in that aspects of how finances are managed and how it is important to tap those resources. Mr. Reza also has a master's from Punjab University, Lahore in geography. And presently, he is a member of the Pakistan Agricultural Research Council. So with that, I hand over to the chair to introduce the panelists and start off on the session.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, namaste and assalamu alaikum. Today's session, we have sub-theme which deals with the subject of enhancing compatibility, connecting national adaptation plans with the global strategies. And we have expert among us to discuss the questions in this integration between the national and global action plans and the question arising out of that. We have with us Ms. Rogina from UNFCCC and Mr. Vijay Singh. He is in a United Nations Development Program in Nepal. Mr. Batu Opreti is LEG chair with the UNFCCC. Mr. Vijay Singh, and then Arbinder Mishra from the institution which is called TERI. It's in India and other regional states. So first of all, I would request Ms. Rogina to, first of all, let me introduce the key speaker in this, Mr. Atikur Rahman from Bangladesh. He is our expert, and I request Mr. Atikur Rahman to address his keynote. Mr. Atikur Rahman. Thank you, Sir.
Good morning, friends on the podium, ladies and gentlemen, friends in working for a better world, reduced climate risk, and better adaptation. What I will do in the next few minutes, literally 10 minutes, is zoom through some of the critical concepts and what is happening, hoping to link global, local to the national in the meantime. So, one of the central messages, adaptation is happening, and climate change is here and now. Who are doing most of it are the community themselves across the world. And as we go along with the farmers across the world, we get a common message. And the message is something isn't right in our life right now. And that is a shifting of extreme weather events or things not happening in time. Most of the people are forced to adapt. And some are adapting in the fullest knowledge that something is happening around what is called climate change, not necessarily understanding the 8,000 multiplied by 3, 24,000 pages of IPCC report, but generally understanding something isn't right. Others are adapting intuitively and experientially, and I'll try to delve on the knowledge of that. So why are people adapting? They're trying to respond to the vulnerabilities, and I'll give a case study of just some samples on Bangladesh so that we can see what's happening. Now, this is a communities, those are adapting in agriculture and water sector in the rural setting. People are raising their plinths in the coastal areas, basically with their own efforts, no support, their own time, own labor, because the seawater with salt is entering their houses, particularly in the highest tide period. They are trying to raise little of the land so that they can do their agriculture, allowing salt water to pass through. They're raising their toilets because sanitation has, lot of effort. People have moved, but yet new challenges. Animals have to be protected, so animals have to be raised. Food grains have to be protected. The storage becomes a challenge, and people are trying to get better water filtered so that the impurities don't affect them, maintain their food under dry conditions. Harvesting rainwater has been one of the greatest challenges that has come up as a solution, but has a cost to it, and many of the initiatives by local government, NGOs, and others are doing it. This is called a floating garden. A garden allows with water hyacinths compressed becomes a float on which new systems grow, paddy, turmeric, you name it, and good, and they float as the flood collapses, the system collapses, become fertilizer for the fish. In the highlands, in the hilly regions, they have to raise, and the water stream positions are shifting, they have to go to new positions. Irrigation is in the same world of too much water availability, so drip irrigation is in practice. So where salt water has come, people are trying to go to crab farming, and salt tolerant variety of rice has come in, but the yield isn't that great. So that is a glimpse of some of the things people are doing, whether we like it or not, just to give an evidential record that really things are happening. Now, Bangladesh is known as the most vulnerable country in the world, and everybody is claiming to be most vulnerable. In Cancun, there was a conference on vulnerability. I was asked to chair it, and one of the ministers said, this is not a beauty contest. You don't have to be the most beautiful or the most vulnerable. The fact that you are vulnerable is bad enough. So there is vulnerability of different type. Bangladesh is known as vulnerable because multiple vulnerabilities compound. And as you know, in terms of risks, when two risks meet together, it's not additive, it's multiplicative. So it becomes far more complex. So there are 12 different vulnerabilities. I will just mention one or two of those quickly. Bangladesh is situated, as you know, in the bottom of the Himalayas, and this is highland-lowland interaction, integral part, and has hills on the eastern part of the country. Sea level rise is one of the greatest threat. For 1 meter sea level rise, Bangladesh map will look something like this, and that will disappear. If that amount of land was taken by another country, every citizen will run with their guns and fight. But here, who do we fight? What is the global linkage? There is a global phenomenon having local impact, local people being devastated. Drought, we have done modeling at 2030, 2075, anything red would be increased drought, even in a country which is flood-prone like Bangladesh. Migration is becoming one of the internal displacement issues, and people don't want to move, despite all this talk about migration. We have done rigorous studies. People don't want to move. And then they go to the nearest system. Some ultimately have to go externally, and no one wants to leave their land. It's a whole thing has become a global justice issue, a major one, and migration is happening. And this is a map of why people are migrating to major cities mostly. So in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, what is really happening is the monsoon will remain, total amount of rainfall will remain the same, but it will come over a shorter number of days. So the velocity of the water will be faster, there will be greater number of landslides. And that is pretty true in many of the mountain areas. So how do we link climate change adaptation to up and down? So climate change is the greatest threat that we have today, and it is a global phenomenon with local impacts. It's a vulnerability, and it will impact all sectors, but the focus is on agriculture, food security, water and health, resource livelihood, infrastructure, rural and urban development. So climate change will affect the poor disproportionately. It is one of the greatest unfairness that human history has ever known, and it is the greatest market failure that our economic system has ever known. So what is the linkage? It is linked to sustainable development. That's what we desire to have, which is economic growth, which is environmentally sound, socially just. Easier said than done. In the climate change world, there are new threats coming, and extreme events would be the operational mode in which the impact is highest. It has implication on knowledge, and we have been talking here about knowledge. There is scientific knowledge, which is us, IPCC Wallers and others, who are trying to generate, and we understand a bit, but can we communicate that to people that matter? Upward to the policymakers, do they at all take it? Downward to our people, do they understand? Can we make the difference? And the people have their own knowledge. The farmers who are feeding at least whole of South Asia, if not the whole of the world, the farmers are feeding whole of the world. 1/3 to half of them are still non-literate. So what do they do with the knowledge we have unless we can package it differently and properly? So this integration of scientific knowledge to local knowledge is one of the key challenges that we have today. The farmers have their knowledge, non-literate knowledge from their grandparents and parents. If that accumulation is not fast enough, and right now all indications are climate change is going to be faster than the knowledge accumulation process, there will be knowledge gap that will create into a food gap that will create into conflicts. So there is a whole sequence out there. It's the science has to work with policies and integrate people. Now in most democracies is the science policy linkage, that's why most of the work is done, hoping that people will be integrated. Unfortunately, people are often not integrated. Our democracies are not strong enough. So scientists have a special role to that. And it's the new horizon, new science, where we have to be multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. Natural science has to work with social science. So sustainable development and climate linkage is going together all the time. So what is happening in overdevelopment process is that as a hazard or a cyclone or a system hurts you, the whole development parameter goes up and our poverty increases and we go back into the whole system down. So basically what is happening is we have a business as usual development path. That's what we have to get at. What climate change will do will suppress that development path. And what adaptation is supposed to do is to overcome that. And not only that, we want to enhance climate smart development, getting into a better dividend world of adaptation. So converting the greatest challenge into an opportunity. That's what we have to do in our planning process, and it's going to affect our water security, food security, livelihood, health, energy, in all aspects of life. Water will be the main medium of adaptation need. Too much water is flood, too little water is drought, wrong type of water like salinity increases, and wrong timing of water of rainfall or precipitation or snowmelt. It's going to affect human communities, enterprises, ecosystem, and institutions alike. And basically, as I showed, poor are paying, rich are talking of paying, and some payment has been made, but as I said yesterday, there has been a Kathmandu declaration sitting in this very room a few months ago, where the World Community-Based Adaptation 8th World Conference demanded that all the funds that come under climate change, 50% must be for adaptation. Now it's only 14%, 1/4. 86% is for mitigation. And out of the 50%, another 50% of that, so 25% of total climate fund of any sort must go to the most vulnerable. Because there is a huge leakage. The money goes to the central kitty, never reaches the people. Capacity and knowledge building, supporting role of the non-government and civil society, wide-ranging adaptation, so it's not just one, it has to be many, and rigorous monitoring and evaluation. So there are a set of criteria that will be done with this whole system, and adaptation and mitigation can go together. And I will conclude by saying that one of the essential parts is good science, effective policy, people's acceptance and participation, pro-development activities, adequate assured finance. Nobody, no person will do climate adaptation for climate's sake. It has to be for development purposes. Good.
We should go for the National Action Plan and Local Action Plan together. And mitigation and adaptation plan should be jointly implemented. And another thing is that fund should be raised for more of the fund should be raised for the adaptation policies. Some of the questions arising out of this discussion, I would request the panelists, our experts, to address to these questions. I would like to invite Ms. Rogina Manandar to discuss the question about the key global programs for supporting adaptation efforts by the national government. Rogina.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Drupad and ICIMOD, for the opportunity. It's my privilege to share the podium with the eminent personalities, and I'm really honored. I just want to quote what Christiana Figueres, our Executive Secretary from the UNFCCC, said in the opening inaugural session here during the conference. Success in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region depends on the unprecedented international cooperation. And I would like to build on her remarks that she provided, which is true to some extent. And I would like to use my time today to provide some entry points, more an example that UNFCCC is deliberating as a global process on adaptation under the convention, and whereby I hope to provide some clarity in terms of the entry points where the parties and experts and institutions outside the convention could be also engaged in ensuring, facilitating adaptation actions. So I'm going to use the graphical slide to help explain my intervention. And please bear with me because my intervention will be very much process-oriented, but of course I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have after my intervention. If you look at the evolving adaptation landscape under the convention, I hope you agree that the UNFCCC process has raised ambition and visibility on adaptation discourse in all countries. And in particular, UNFCCC process has provided necessary guidance, technical guidance. Back in 2001, when the IPCC, the second assessment report, when the discussion primarily was whether we need to adapt. With that, parties reported the vulnerability and adaptation assessment to national communications. With the next iteration of the IPCC report, the third assessment report, parties did recognize that adaptation is very important, and definitely the question then moved from whether do we need to adapt to how do we adapt. With that, there was a very important milestone in adaptation work under the convention, and I would also like to supplement that with some of the immediate outcomes which are in process as I speak. The first being the work program for the least developed countries, recognizing the special needs and situation of the least developed countries, LDCs. And I'm happy to share the panel with Batuji, who is also the least developed country expert group chair, who will provide more light into the work of the leg. So I will not go into details, but the LDC work program also established a process for countries to develop and communicate priority activities in addressing the urgent and immediate adaptation needs, which we all know NAPAs. And as of now, just to give an idea, there have been 49 LDCs had submitted NAPAs, and of which 158 projects have been approved by the GEF Council for funding. And some of the projects are ongoing implementation, where some of the projects have entered into implementation. So if you look at the graphical evolution, and the least developed expert group, just for you to know, is the group which is under the convention to provide technical guidance and support to formulate and implement NAPAs. And of course, the mandate for the leg has been expanded to also implement NAPs, which I will also explain in a few minutes. Following the NAPAs, parties did recognize the importance of sharing of knowledge and lessons learned, which is very critical to the conference today for this particular session too. And for that, the Nairobi Work Program on Impacts, Vulnerability and Adaptation to Climate Change was established in 2005. The work program, since establishment, it was continued and it was scaled up in Warsaw in the recent COP as a knowledge mechanism on adaptation under the convention, with the idea to respond to knowledge needs and adaptation. And it's a unique platform, and I would like to highlight the work program here in my intervention as one of the very important entry points to engage with parties, and not necessarily with parties, but also because it provides a very important link linking to institutions, experts, and resources outside the convention to respond to knowledge needs, not just the ones identified by parties, but also the ones identified by various adaptation work streams under the conventions, one of them being the NAPS. So the way the link established is through two aspects. The first being engaging institutions like many of you here, engaging as a partner organization under the Nairobi Work Program, and ICIMOD being one of them. And the second being the synthesis, provision, and dissemination of information and knowledge on various issues. Just to quickly highlight the evolution of Nairobi Work Program in the recent discourse, would focus at synthesis and dissemination of adaptation planning actions at various levels, not just at the national, but regional, national, and sub-national levels, addressing the 4 issues: water resources, ecosystems, human settlements, and health. And we do foresee very active engagement with organizations, in particular regional centers and networks, in implementing the activities under the work program. Very briefly, I don't have a lot of time, so very briefly, with the IPCC 4th assessment report, parties did recognize the importance of raising the importance of adaptation as equal to the mitigation. With that, parties agreed, parties in the Cancun agreements agreed on the Cancun adaptation framework. And one of the major outcomes of that being the NAPS, which is a process for the least developed countries to develop and implement strategies and policies for the medium and long-term adaptation needs. And in addition to NAPS, there are 2 important outcomes under the Cancun adaptation framework. At the Adaptation Committee, a technical advisory body on adaptation to ensure coherence of adaptation work under the convention. And I wouldn't have a lot of time to go into details, but Adaptation Committee does provide a very important opportunity to engage with organization in ensuring the enhancing coherence and synergy, as well as to provide technical recommendation to the COP on issues surrounding adaptation and on means of implementation. And then the work program on loss and damage to address the loss and damage associated with the adverse impact of climate change. So I think, in nutshell, adaptation, global process on UNFCCC is of course one of the entry points, not necessary the everything, but we do hope that these provide useful entry points as countries and even the local communities work to enhance implementation of action. And I think the parties are now discussing from how to enhance adaptation to how to integrate adaptation into the social, economic, and environmental policies and actions with the work on NAPS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. As we are aware that UNFCCC has initiated the action, initiated supporting nations for adaptation plans, and in line with that, the United Nations Development Program and UNEP have launched national action plans for the global support program for the nations. So I would request Mr. Vijay Singh, he is working with the UNDP in Nepal, to share his experience on how the international organization in the region currently communicating with the governments and providing support to national action programs, and what is the mechanism for that support. Mr. Vijay Singh.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. First, I want to express my sincere thanks to ICIMOD for organizing such a pertinent international conference, which provides an opportunity for the mountain community to benefit from the interface between policy, science, and practices. And thanks for inviting UNDP and giving a space for discussion into this August meeting about national adaptation planning and global support program, which has been set up to support the countries to prepare for the national adaptation plan. In partnership with ICIMOD in 2012, UNDP published a human development report, which was regional for Asia Pacific, and that was on the theme of climate change, vulnerability, and resilience. Why I'm referring it? Because that report highlights the plights of the mountain people, the way they suffer from the vulnerability, and the urgency to address the needs. Now, when we talk about adaptation, again, we have to go back to the mountain community to tell them that they are the people who have to take urgent actions for adaptation. And the whole global process, as well as the national process, as well as the local level process, are geared towards supporting the mountain people to address the vulnerability that they have been facing, and they would be facing in the future as well. So that's the context. Now I'm quite happy that Rosina has already highlighted upon the UNFCCC process, and there has been a keynote speak already made that was about how the mountain people are vulnerable and how the climate is posing additional vulnerability to that. My topic is trying to establish a link between the global and the national processes, and how UNDP and UN agencies are set to support the countries, the governments, to prepare the national adaptation plans. There are many ways to look at that, but I want to take the benefit of the presentation just made. I think last year in community-based adaptation workshop, international workshop, there was an agreement that the 50% of the funds should go to the local community, and the adaptation funds should go to the local community. That is one. Another is, most of the countries in the region, the Hindu Kush, as well as LDCs and many other countries, have already developed the national adaptation plans of actions. Most of the plans of actions have been implemented. But all these plans of actions were looking at the short-term, immediate and urgent priorities for adaptation. It was, at the time, the thinking was that we have to address the imminent threats and identify the urgent priority adaptation needs and build the capacity to address those needs. From NAPA to NAP, the difference is that here we are talking about not only the immediate and urgent priority needs, but we're talking about the systems, the institutions, how they can develop their own capacity to address the climate vulnerability, to address to take on the adaptation priorities in the longer term and the medium term. So now there is an opportunity. To work on, for the government, for the stakeholders to work on national planning process, national adaptation planning process, thinking of an approach which could be valid for medium term and long term. And that is where the process of NAF has started. UNDP, together with UNEP, has set up a facility which is called National Adaptation Planning Facility under the Global Support Program. And the many countries in the region has shown their interest into that program, and they have started taking benefit of that. I think the Bangladesh has already started preparing a roadmap for National Adaptation Plan. Sri Lanka is very much ready to take it up. Nepal, we are still having intense discussion with the government, and government is quite supportive towards that. And then the next stage will how we, UNDP, UNEP, and other agencies could provide support to the government for national adaptation planning process. Now, what that facility or what this process provides to the country? There are many ways. One is the technical support that is being provided. So if the country opts for NAP preparation, then there is a support package from the Global Support Program, which the country can benefit from. And that support package includes the technical support, the financial support established through the LDCF, as well as the capacity to leverage efforts and the facilities and finances from other resources and the other funding. Again, this is going to be a country-driven process, so it provides an opportunity for the government as well as all national stakeholders to sit together to identify the long-term and medium-term priority adaptation needs of the country and devise how the country should prepare to address them. So when we talk about the community level action planning or community level adaptation plans or local level adaptation plans. I think in the NAP process, when it starts, there will be an opportunity to interlink the community level processes, the local level adaptation processes, and reflect it into the national level process. That is one. Second, when we identify that, when we start the national level process for adaptation planning, it provides an opportunity to look into the national planning system, the national budgetary system, how the budgets are distributed, how the national planning processes are going on to prioritize the national development goals, and there will be an opportunity to look into how the adaptation planning could be mainstreamed into the national planning processes. So that is the support facility that have been that is the part of the package, and we have been supporting in all countries to the government to start the process. Again, NAP is not going to start from the scratch. We have a full understanding that every country has a stock of about their vulnerability status, has a stock of the best practices that have been working, because talking about the mountain people have been adapting to climate in one way or the other for several years. Now the time demands more urgent actions and immediate actions. So identifying those potential best practices and making a link to the national adaptation planning process would safeguard the efforts of the local people, the mountain people who have been using adaptation practices for a long time, and also provide a potential opportunity for experts' inputs, for financing, for other technical support. I'm very happy here, the chair of the list expert group, list developed country expert group, is in the panel today, and he might be discussing about more detail into that. But just one last point I want to make is the impact of the climate is global, but again the local actions are required and that local action will use the science in terms of the tools and the methodology, will benefit from the policy that the governments are going to set up, and benefit from the best practices which have been proven in a particular context, in a particular institutional setup. So with this, I want to conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vijay Singh. And as we know that the international organization have already taken this initiative, but still responsibility lies upon the nation states which are part of this initiative. And they have to prepare their action plans at the level of the
Napa to Lapa. We need to address the local problems. Now another stream, there is another stream, that is NAP, National Adaptation Plan, which might help to the LDCs to prepare for their survival. I don't want to repeat on that. The NAP is designed to reduce climate vulnerability and to facilitate the integration of climate change adaptation into resolution is how we can localize these adaptation actions through the NAP process. Might be, so many countries might be interested to prepare local adaptation plans or like that. Anyway, what we consider is, at the national level, based on the consultation with the LDCs, there is still a need to have a concerted effort to enhance the level of understanding to the national governments. Those who are negotiating with the developed countries, they understand what NAPS talks about. But those who are implementing at the ground, they are not quite aware about the importance of integrating adaptation into the planning process and by implementing climate change adaptation in the ground. So what we need to do is we need more effort to enhance the level of understanding at the national governments, at different sectors, and at different levels. NAP will focus not only on key, few sectors. It will have multidimensional approach to address different sectors. And how we can benefit from the existing mechanism, we need to explore new resources. And we need to, again, add on the support mechanism. But it is not easy task. First, we intend to, first, those who intend to communicate need to have the common understanding on NAP, what we mean to do under this. And our need is how climate change affected sectors are informed on the implications of climate change and how to engage them in integrating adaptation into development planning and how to localize this integration process at different sectors. Few LDCs, as Vijayji has indicated, they have started the NAP process. Based on the present level of information, there are 23 countries who will be engaged in the NAP GSP, NAP Global Support Program. I'm sorry to say that this is a projectized support. LDC needs programmatic support. Once the project will terminate, once the funding will be finished, then whole Niger, Tanzania, and Togo. So there are few gaps. The gaps is inadequate and lack of awareness at the political level, capacity to harness resources, and capacity to conduct rigorous and comprehensive risk and vulnerability assessment. Climate change has been the agenda of the Environment Ministry or the UNFCCC focal point. We have to cross that boundary. And many LDCs have indicated that there is a lack of procedures to assess the funding from the LDCF and for activities to enable the preparation of NAP process. Furthermore, both funds are voluntary, are based on voluntary contributions and suffer from inadequate and unpredictable financing. But there are some process mechanism exist. LDC expert group have prepared the technical guidelines. It has also, started training and preparing the core cadre to initiate the NAP process in the LDCs. With this, I would like to thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Batu. And we understand that, as Mr. Batu has stated, that we need to have cross-border integration and cooperation, because climate change is not an isolated phenomena and localized phenomena for a specific country or state. It's a global phenomena. And every state, every nation has its own capacities as far as the institutional capacities and financial capacities are concerned. So we need to integrate all these national plans also with the regional plans, and then have benefit from the global experience and knowledge. I would request Mr. Arbinda Mishra, who is from the Energy Resource Institute, to discuss the issue of how can we improve the synergy between global and national level efforts. Mr. Mishra.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, friends. What do we mean by synergies when we think of global processes and national responses? We have heard the panelists and the keynote speaker talking about the need to mobilize resources, the need to bring about enhanced technology support, access to technology on the adaptation front, particularly for LDCs. And we all understand the importance of capacity building, particularly at the institutional level. So these three things, whether you look at local adaptation plans, whether you look at national adaptation plans, you look at LDCs, you look at non-LDCs, these are the three core pillars on which any adaptation plan will rest: technology, capacity, and resources. And in these three domains, you have ample scope for synergies to be exploited if we look at the processes, particularly some of the missing mechanisms that still need to be filled up. And I will use this opportunity to make 5 points. Number one, Rosina spoke about adaptation committee and its efforts to bring about coherence at the global level amongst all the UNFCCC bodies. And that's part of the one cluster area of the Cancun adaptation framework that was adopted in 2012. The need to enlarge the scope of stakeholder consultations. But for a theme like adaptation, this coherence needs to go beyond UNFCCC bodies. So that's the first point that I would like to make. And I can bring a very specific example. Let's talk about food security, global food security, regional food security. Unless you bring about a coherence amongst the UN processes, the regional processes, multilateral processes that are happening outside of the convention, it will be very difficult to exploit synergies. Immediately the thing that comes to mind is WTO process. Food security, something which is very intricately linked to what's happening on the WTO front. So there is a need for coherence at that level. So the adaptation committee's efforts to bring about coherence needs to go beyond UNFCCC. That's my first point. It's not an easy task, it's challenging, but it has to be done. Second thing, from the global, you come to the regional level. At a regional scale, we find a very, thin presence of enabling institutions. Take this region. You have SAARC, the South Asia Regional, Cooperation of Countries, 8 member countries. And one can immediately list out a dozen areas in which cooperation will bring about synergies. And most of the institutional and organizational mechanisms are in place, whether it is disaster risk reduction, whether it is on the forestry front, you have SAARC institutions here. But they have to go beyond simply the institutional setting up, beyond mandating certain functions. There has to be a political commitment and a political endorsement of what these mandates are expected to achieve. And truly, at a regional scale, one has to bring in the concept of adaptation as a regional public good if these institutions are to find their relevance in the adaptation domain. So at a regional scale, we need to introduce the concept of adaptation as a regional public good and empower these institutions, and if the institutions are absent, probably these institutional mechanisms have to be created. Number 3, go to the national scale. And most of my comments will come from whatever knowledge I have on the national responses in the South Asia region. And one thing that comes out very strikingly is that they connect with the local scale, particularly the local stakeholders, be it government entities or be it non-government entities. The connect has not been substantive. Yes, you find consultations. Most of the documents probably speak about meetings held, consultations held. But the process, we all know, defines the content. And often the process has been part of a formalization, part of a tokenism, if I may use that in a very, very strong sense, that has occurred. And that's not the way we have these action plans as meaningful documents in which when you take this to the local level, you expect local stakeholders to take ownership of these programs or the projects that are aimed at building coping capacity. So national responses need to more substantively engage with local stakeholders, need to be more inclusive in their process of taking into account stakeholders' concerns. Fourth point, at a very local level, the key word is capabilities. At a global level, we talk about all these things, technology, resources, about institutions, but when you go to local level, you run against a big capacity constraint. And when I talk about capacity, I am not ignoring the pockets of expertise, pockets of traditional knowledge, the way capacity is defined at the local level. There are capabilities at the local level. But the kind of capabilities that we expect when we talk about adaptation, probably you need to have some connects. I'll give you a specific example. At a global level, UNEP is now hosting the CTCN, the Climate Technology Center and Network. It talks about network building, it talks about partnerships. But how much of it is really coming from an understanding of the kind of technology that local stakeholders want, and the kind of technologies that local resource systems and local social systems can accept, can adopt in a shorter time frame. So that roadmap, particularly on the capacity building front, is missing. So at a local level, we need to have that kind of a roadmap immediately coming up. And the final point is that if the Cancun adaptation framework is to really maybe implemented in an effective manner, three things that needs to be focused on by the convention, by the United Nations, are speed of implementation. Yes, many things are happening, but we heard the keynote speakers talking about how action on climate change is increasingly becoming urgent. And what we see at the global level happening is perhaps not at the pace that we desire. So speed. The second is scale. We keep on talking about projects, adaptation programs, but we have reached a stage where it has to be at a scale where it makes a difference. So scalability, scalable efforts, that's the need of the hour. And third is scope, how comprehensive you can make this adaptation action. So I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Mr. Mishra. And I would request our panelists, if they have the views and if they desire to add to the discussions already taken place.
Go to the audience.
Okay, if not, then we open the floor for questions and discussion, comments, questions. And as already explained, that we would prefer young people to participate in this discussion, because we want them to give chance to integrate their views and comments in this theme, sub-theme of the conference. Yes. And the structure would be like this, that we would request that if you have a question, then first discuss this question on the table with your fellow participants, and then raise the question, because it would have shared wisdom of the participants also. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that there are some cards, either yellow or pink ones, on your tables. We'd like you to spend a few moments maybe discussing questions or comments that you wish to raise with the panel with the other people sitting on your table. Then we'll take some questions and comments from the floor in a couple of minutes' time.
Climate change is very evident, and we need to have our local strategies integrated with national and global strategies. And, as you very wisely said, that people knowledge is a very important thing. We cannot go for adaptation policy without integrating the local knowledge. If we impose that scientific knowledge, they may have some social problems.
Give enough answer.
No.
Type of answers they can.
Interesting, and
will have much bigger estimation of time satisfied. And from the generation, we know that people are used to some localized adaptation strategies or options. They have their methods, as I understand, that I belong to village. People, when there was disaster or there was some announcement, they beat the drum as far as the preparedness for the first, and it was considered. And they have different tones of drums to communicate. So we may integrate these people into technology. Yes. And in our communities, masjid, mosque is the place from where we announce and we gather the people and we motivate the people. So we should have a community participation in this. That
questions on the shared question.
I think the first experiment
Not happening, but these are the points that made that that's not enough to have a real plan program of the magnitude of the problem. Playing with earlier billions of dollars that you can do.
There's so much. Although we do invite all of the expertise that's relevant for the particular topic. And
They
the
ended
whole
the
mandate is
programmatic support sign and project I support.
pretty experimental.
So guess again.
Is now embarked on one of our first phase.
Our
Where we are
like developing country lang yo and this like project
as a
clear ba.
as a work program, but
NAPCO support.
Development.
and the whole idea is
Okay, proposal sa TV lang sa sekolah semua yo ni
अर्को proposal चाहिँ त्यो डेभलपिङ कन्ट्रीको लागि छ अहिले त एलडिसीको लागि
ya kita itu kodum saja.
ladies and gentlemen, attention please.
I think that's where CD came and
I think
gaining membership.
you have shared your views amongst you, and I would like to invite first question. Okay, from this table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very important discussion going on, the climate change adaptation. I am Prakash Tiwari. I am from Kumar University, Nainital, Uttarakhand, India. So we have a nice discussion this morning on linking the national adaptation to up to the local level. And there was also some discussion within the panelists about the interlinking it up to higher level, the regional levels. But this is a right platform where we need to discuss that how in a region like South Asia, which has some of the largest transboundary river basins of the world, which have their sources in the Hindu-Kush-Himalayan mountain ranges. So if we are going to be very honest about the National Adaptation Plan as well as the local, taking down it to up to the local level, so we need to have some sort of policy discussion how the countries of this region, the top policy planning makers, should discuss that we need to have a integrated river basin management system for adapting to climate change. Because we are not discussing this. Of course, there is an interactive session later. The people will be divided in certain group. And we need to think about that. And we need to honestly realize that we need to have a climate change adaptation plan on the catchment basis. Second thing, we are talking about the local level adaptation plan. So we must need to discuss what would be the role of institutions, not only the government institution, but the private institution, the NGOs, the civil society organization. We have very good institution in Nepal and India, like the Forestry Council in Nepal and the Forest Panchayat in Uttarakhand. They are playing very good role, even into climate change adaptation at local level. So we need to have how these local institutions, public, private, civil societies, NGOs, community institutions, could be involved in the local level climate change adaptation plan. Thank you so much.
Just in front of
Good morning. From our table, actually, there's one question but with two dimensions. One, promoting adaptation in ecological boundaries or administrative boundaries. Because when we talk about NAPA, actually we are talking about national boundaries, or we talk about LAPA, we probably are talking about district boundaries. So which direction to follow in terms of merits and demerits? And the other one is the proliferation of different types of adaptation plans, which we are hearing since yesterday. For example, we heard yesterday ecosystem-based adaptation planning. Today we heard integrating adaptation in development planning. Then we've heard of standalone adaptation plans at national and district level or local level. And if I take example of Pakistan, we even heard of sectoral adaptation planning because climate change policy talks about it. Which direction to follow? What message shall I take home?
Just wondering, we heard a lot. I just don't know what is new actually. So any comments from the panelists?
Here, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I have suggestions. How to connect the national plan to global strategy to adaptation? It's a very big question. I have a suggestion for the United Nations. There are many departments have the responsibility to the adaptation, and they have a global strategy for climate change. My suggestion is, should United Nations to establish a institution or mechanism to make this force together more stronger to connect with each country's planning. And there are many international organizations that are very powerful, even beyond the sum of our power. And the United Nations can coordinate this force to push forward each country's plans, from the global strategy to national plan, to regional plan, to local level. Thank you.
Do we do one more question, or yes?
Yes. From here, this table in the middle.
Good morning, everyone. I am Subhash Prasad Rai from Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, India. I have a question that what are the steps being undertaken or we need to take to increase the expenditure from 14% to 50% for community-based adaptation? As it was discussed, that it was decided in April this year that the expenditure has to be increased to 50%. But what are the steps being undertaken to increase the expenditure to 50%? Thank you.
Right at the back there is a hand.
I'm having the mic. I'm Khurshid Ali Qureshi from Pakistan, and I have a question and a comment. It's a hard fact that in order to address climate change and its effects, both mitigation actions and adaptation actions are imperative. But it is unfortunate that since 2012, there has been no policy or no commitment for mitigation actions, which means that the Annex I countries, the developed countries will continue polluting the atmosphere with the emission of greenhouse gases, and the less developed countries, they will have to take the brunt in the form of adverse conditions. So there is a need to ponder about this issue as well. Thank you.
I think this will be the last question.
Thank you so much. I think enough is said about the framework, how to do the adaptation policy, how to implement it.
Thank you. Whatever table discussed here, that the message is very clear, loud and clear from the panel that action at subnational level, at local level are required. So we were wondering, have we ever done an assessment of the understanding of local public representative, political representative, about their understanding on climate change issues and adaptation perspective per se? Because they have to take action, and without waiting for external finance, there is a huge scope of mainstreaming adaptation into development planning, which cannot happen without support of local political representatives. And in my personal opinion, like SARC example was given, can we think of presenting the recommendation of this workshop to the SARC summit in their upcoming summit? And I think ICIMOD is very well strategically focused on it, and they can make this contribution by presenting the recommendation of this workshop to the SARC. Thank you.
I see a lot of interest amongst the participants, but we are time constrained. We have to, yeah, we can have a second round, and then I would request our expert to respond to the questions relevant to their discussion questions. I would request Mr. Atiq to address to the questions regarding.
Have agreed. One is the Dhaka Declaration, other is the Thimphu Declaration. There is another declaration on disaster, the Malé Declaration. So I don't think we are running short of declaration of that sort. You know, South Asia, I am a South Asian, we are great at talking. Implementation is not our strong point. So I think implementing that and getting local people much more organized. Let me take one on the finance, 14 to 50%, how will this money come? The negotiation discussion on the money is beginning. There will be some more in Lima in end of December, beginning of December, and then by Paris meeting in 2015, it has to be sorted out. There isn't much money on the table. One of the tragedies about money is that when there was a financial crisis, there was no money in US exchequer. $1 trillion came out to support the bankers. When climate change and the poor die, no such money comes. So how do we get the money on place? That's the first one. Second is, as money comes, we have to make sure it goes to the most vulnerable. Otherwise, it will be another, you know, the 40 years of aid trade, aid business. We don't want another 10 years of climate business. We want climate to do the effective job, just not playing with money. So there has to be very serious action on that. There are procedures, there are possibilities, there are ways of organizing communities, and I think most communities, particularly in South Asia communities, are far more organized at that level. Let me stop at those two others. I would request my colleagues to take over.
One question is regarding the establishment of institutions and mechanism by the United Nations. I would request Regina to respond to this question.
Thank you for the question. Very briefly, I'm going to go back to Dr. Mishra's intervention on avoiding, on the need to go beyond the UNFCCC process or global processes to that matter. So the idea that we had heard a suggestion about establishing an institution to enable, to engage local communities and the link between local and global actions. We do have existing processes, and I would be very careful in establishing additional institution. It's more, as one of the participants did say about proliferation of a lot of additional mechanisms or processes when we can possibly use existing mechanisms that are already in place. For example, under the process, Dr. Mishra also mentioned about the need of adaptation committee to go beyond the global process and need to engage stakeholders, possibly at the local level. So that I would see as a very good avenue. And also one of the intervention I made on the Nairobi work program, and parties did recognize the need to engage, not establishing an institution per se, but to need to engage institutions. And the real interest and the real proposal from their side is to engage and to provide ownership with the regional centers and networks. So in the context of Nairobi work program, there is a very clear mandate to invite regional centers and networks to be the platform for implementing activities under the Nairobi work program. So this is already a very, to us, it's a very good evolution of the work. And by doing so, the idea is to engage the actors at the local level more by providing ownership with the regional centers and networks. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you. There was a question about ecological boundaries and national or political boundaries and which directions to go. There should be some sectoral adaptation plan also from the floor. I would request Mr. Mishra to respond to this question.
Okay, a difficult question, and I wouldn't, frame it as an either-or issue. That adaptation need to be thought of either in terms of ecological boundaries or in terms of, administrative boundaries. I think it's understanding what are the sources of vulnerability, what are the kind of adaptation needs that have to be addressed. And of course, from a governance point of view, there are constraints of administration, and often, program design, policy design have to take account of administrative boundaries. But the starting point I would see in terms of spelling out adaptation needs is to look at, both ecosystems as habitats, and I can actually give an example of, the understanding of this at the policy level also. In India, we have this Green India mission, which is part of the National Action Plan on Climate Change. And it has introduced the concept of a landscape. So from a traditional, understanding of forest as a unit of, implementation, it has moved to a landscape which takes into account, the social systems, the other resource systems that may also be there. Another concept that is coming up is habitat. So when we talk about cities, we are not talking about as administrative systems, but we are talking about this as habitats, which which makes it more easier to to integrate interventions and also bring about coordination amongst government entities. This is a challenge that is going to remain. But I think one way to address it is to identify adaptation needs based on what are the sources of vulnerability, and then accordingly align one's governance arrangements.
You would like to add your views?
Yeah, I would like to particularly add my views on two questions and complement to the responses from the colleagues here. One is regarding the institutions. I think I very much support the idea that we should be very careful when we talk about opening up the new institutions, because in every country, it is the question of how to make a link to the national mechanism down to the up to the global mechanism. The question is much more related to the mandates of the institutions rather than creating a new institution. Since climate change adaptation planning is a new phenomenon, then at every country, the existing institutions has to redefine its mandates, which institution is most relevant to take up that issue. For example, either it could be a planning ministry or planning commission, or it could be a ministry of environment and all. But the crucial point is the engagement of the stakeholders in the process. And whatever mechanism is needed for that, that has to be devised at the country level. And many countries have different ways of doing that. Some countries has climate change council at the highest level, at the level of the prime minister. Some countries has some kind of a steering mechanism that has been working very effectively in those countries. So, instead of opening up a new institution, I think the idea here is to see the effectiveness of the existing institutions and try to see that how the mandates can be reloaded into those institutions so that the institutions start working on climate adaptation planning, because the whole adaptation planning and the NAP process is looking into the existing policies, existing strategies, existing planning and budgetary system, and try to see how the adaptation plan can get priority to that. So that is, I think, my response. Another question which has already been responded by my colleague here from Terry, or Dr. Arvinda. I just want to reflect my views. I think it is very difficult to decide whether we should take the administrative boundary or the ecological boundary when we talk about adaptation plan, because it depends on what the scale of vulnerability we are talking about. The scale could be at the level of the river basin, and sometimes it goes across the boundaries, across the national boundaries. So between the two nations, between the two countries, there has to be a kind of negotiation to do that, and the scale goes beyond that. At some times it is very localized, and we can take a district boundary. At some times it becomes even smaller when we take out the VDC boundary, depending on the scale of the vulnerability, which have to be defined in the given context. But the key point is, when we talk about adaptation programming or planning, I think we have to take a scale which is sufficient to address the issues. And the landscape approach of looking at vulnerability is being accepted as the most effective way of looking at vulnerabilities and addressing the issues, because it gives a vision to identify the vulnerability across the landscape, and then we can split the landscape into most vulnerable, moderately vulnerable, and the least vulnerable, and adaptation plan can be planned according to that. Then the confusion relates to community-based adaptation, ecosystem-based adaptation. I think there was a whole session on that. I don't want to get into that. But these are the tools. They are the tools. I think the key point is community. We have to ensure that the community is involved in the process. So community are just not recipient, but they are owning the process. They are owning the outcome of the adaptation. So that is the key point. So how we can ensure that community participation is happening effectively, and what is ecosystem-based or the sectoral? I think they are the different tools that we have to think about when we talk about adaptation plan. Then adaptation plan in isolation cannot work, because it has to be linked with the national planning process, development planning process. So every adaptation plan, at whatever scale you talk about, either within the village context or within a district context, it has to be linked into the government mechanism at the local level, development planning mechanism at the local level, at the district level, at the regional level. And at all levels, we have to make sure that the key stakeholders are part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. And two questions, important questions have been raised regarding adaptation and mitigation policies. The suggestion was that the both should be implemented side by side. I would request keynote speaker, Mr. Atik, and also comment on the trans-border water issue.
Yeah, let me take the transboundary water from my colleague here from, I think it's Dr. Tiwari. It's absolutely essential that the transboundary of rivers are taken as an unit, and there are already some earlier stages of planning of that type of thinking going on. And from the river issue, transboundary basin-based management has become the scientific way of addressing the issue, and hence it is very, very important that we take the whole boundary issue. That will not only solve many of the other issues, but at the same time, particularly in this region, we have to be very respectful of the water efficiency issues. We have much rivers and much water in this area, but we are not that efficient in using our water, whether it's for agriculture and other systems. So transboundary, absolutely central, and it has to be basin-based management. On the mitigation and adaptation together, I had given a series of examples. In poor countries and poor societies, mitigation will be not done for stopping climate change. It will be done for people's adaptation, people's own developmental need, and there are millions of those needs where there are niches where mitigation may come in. It can be in the form of improved stove, cooking stove, to a more efficient fertilizer use, because for every kilogram of fertilizer, there was a backward linkage of a huge amount of greenhouse gas in the production process, transport process, and what the plant needs. Often it has been elucidated that the fertilizer that is given, only 30% goes to the plants. The rest gets washed out. So how do you make that sort of use efficient? So lots of mitigation opportunities, but it has to be pro-development mitigation opportunities, and that would help. However, we should count for that, and in a future financial world, we should be able to claim for that. These were the concepts hidden in Kyoto Protocol but never implemented. I think there are opportunities in the future if there is a Paris Protocol to go ahead with those. Dr. Batu, you wanted to come in on any of these? Please.
Thank you. This is a big area. My understanding is that we need to start from the local level, bring it at the national level, and then to the regional level. Because we need to it's a good idea to implement climate change adaptation activities based on the vulnerability at the watershed level, river basin level. But again, the national circumstances might be different, national priorities might be different, and that might hinder the process. This is also some sort of, it's not only the technical, this is also some sort of political process should be there to select on that. What we can do is, we can start working from the field level. As a LDC, we have no obligation on mitigation, but we want to contribute on mitigating the adverse impact of climate change and also the greenhouse gas reduction process through the low carbon development pathway strategy. That is what we consider important. Let me also share that we need to have gender-sensitive NAPs. That is very important. LDC expert group has the mandate. It is given by the parties in Cancun in 2010 to support the LDCs on gender-sensitive adaptation activities. We LAG are working on that. We have already prepared the technical paper, and we are refining the tools and the methods how we can support the LDCs in this region, in the Hindu-Kush Himalayan region, where the ICIMOD is engaged. We have 5 LDCs. If we can start NAP process in these LDCs, might be other developing countries of the HKS region will also join. Then we'll have better collaboration platform to start with the broader level of activities and to address broader vulnerability issues or transboundary issues. That I think important to start from the local level. That is very important, and ultimately the climate vulnerable communities are the poor. They don't have the capacity to cope with, and they live in a very vulnerable area. And I would also like to suggest you that if you want more information on the NAP, the LDC expert group has the NAP portal. The NAP portal provides lots of information on the NAP process in several LDCs, and also the adaptation committee and other convention bodies who are working on adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Batu. And with this, I would like to conclude with the remarks this session that we know that climate change is an extremely complex and a new phenomenon. And for that, it's a global phenomenon also. It's not specific to any region or country. So we should have some strategies or plans which are integrated in regional and global perspective. We are required to take the global knowledge and experience and integrate it into the local knowledge and experience. As our keynote speaker expressed that the people knowledge is very important to integrate it with the scientific knowledge. And both should be part of the policies and strategies and plan being formulated by our member state of HKH, Hindu Kush Himalayas countries specifically. So this, with this, no country can have its standalone strategy or plan. We have to integrate our experience and knowledge, and because we have some cross-boundary issues relating to water as expressed by Dr. Atiq in his keynote speech. And one thing is that time is very important. We cannot afford delay in implementing these action plans, because any delay in the implementation of adaptation strategy, that may have a cost. Cost, not only the financial cost, but cost for the communities also. And we know that we have different capacities, institutional capacities and financial capacities in our countries. So we can share our knowledge, and we can benefit from the experience of the other states and countries, especially the global knowledge also. National action plan should not be a localized one, and it should have linkage with the global strategies, and also downward the sub-national plans also. These plans need to be integrated with the involvement of the community. Gender mainstreaming is one of the issues, because we understand that the vulnerable communities, amongst the vulnerable communities, women are the most affected community, as the climate change would have a pressure on the activities of women, especially in our countries. Most of the women are involved in the agriculture activity and rural economy also. So we have to make plans for mainstreaming the gender mainstreaming also, and we should involve the women expert in the formulation of our plans, so they can apprise us the issues relating to this community also. With this, I would thank our panelist experts for their very pertinent and relevant interventions and sharing their knowledge with us, especially the keynote speaker and the other panelists also. I am grateful to the participants who have raised important questions on the subject, highlighting the issues relating to their surroundings. With this, I conclude this session. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Mr. Savareza, the chair, Mr. Atiq Rahman, our keynote speaker, and all the panel members. I also thank very much the audience and the participants for your good questions and lively interactions at the tables. And hereby we conclude this session. Andrew has a few more announcements for you to tell you about what's going to happen after the break.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you to the distinguished panel. So, just before we have our tea break, I'd like to tell you something about the showcase that's going to take place after tea. The title of the showcase is Voices of the Future, Innovative Solutions from Regional Organizations and Presentations from the Next Generation of Changemakers. So we have three people just to tell you a little bit about that, all of them from ICIMOD. We have Nandkishore Agarwal, who is the conference convener, and we have Naina and Rucha, also from ICIMOD, who are going to say something about the showcase. But first of all, I'd like to hand over to Nand.
Good morning. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. On day one of this conference, in the evening, late evening, I read a tweet. Tweet was from Satyarup Siddhartha, who is one of the poster participants in this conference. He wrote, he visited Godavari, so he wrote, visit to Godavari, visit to ICIMOD Knowledge Park at Godavari, innovations all around. Met people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bhutan, China, and Bangladesh. Total 104 people visited the Godavari Knowledge Park. And they saw what innovations are happening. But we have around 250 to 300 participants in the conference. That is almost 2/3 of them could not go to the Knowledge Park to see what innovations were happening. But what we bring to you today is something even better than what is happening in Godavari Park. It's not only ICIMOD innovations, we bring to you innovations from 8 different regional countries. Participants from all these countries are going to present to you some very, very innovative ideas. Young scholars, professionals, they have prepared posters, and regional organizations who will be showcasing what innovations they are doing. And that would the reason why we are doing is that we need to go beyond our own conference room talks to really see that what can happen, what will work and what will not work. And we also believe that seeing is believing. You may not remember what was discussed in this conference 3 years later, but you will surely remember some of the innovations which you will see just in a few minutes from now. We had formed 2 internal teams to select best posters and best marketplace showcase. The teams were Dr. Rucha Ghate and Naina Sakia, very extensively supported by Bhavna. Bhavna, are you here? Yes. So very extensively supported by Bhavna. I won't talk much. I will just hand it over to Rucha and Naina to talk a little bit about the process which took place. Please do visit each of the stall, and we will be really, really grateful to you if you wrote a word of encouragement for these people, young professionals particularly, so that they remember it and maybe they get more encouraged to think about more innovations. So please don't forget to give your feedback, either via email or via tweet or whatever way you think, but that will really, really be sincerely appreciated if you wrote something about their work which they be showcasing to you. Over to you, Rucha.
Thanks, Nand. As Nand has just told us, that in conferences, usually we invite the stalwarts in the topics, and then we all like to hear to them, and the young scholars also benefit from them. But we are also interested in finding what's going on now. What are the young scholars, young professionals thinking? What is their work? So to encourage their work, we decided last year to invite posters to understand about their ongoing work. And I'm very happy to announce that we received as many as 94 entries, of which we have selected 21. 15 of those are by individuals and the rest are institutional. Country-wise distribution is also very interesting. We got 16 submissions from Bangladesh and we selected 3. 3 from Bhutan and 2 were selected. From China there were 3 entries and 1 was selected. From India there were 28 and 4 were selected. From Nepal there were 22 entries, of which 5 were selected. From Pakistan there were 16 and 4 were selected. And from Afghanistan there were 2 entries and both were selected. So in all now we have 21 posters, and like Nan said, we do urge you all to go and visit them and give them a word of encouragement. Thank you so much. I forgot to make a very important announcement that ICIMOD has decided that we are going to select 5 best posters and we are going to award them in the plenary tomorrow. I also request all the young professionals to be around their own posters so that when we come and visit, they are there to explain their posters. Thank you again.
Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the Marketplace Style Innovative Solutions event, which is taking place outside. It is basically a platform and an opportunity to showcase innovative, interesting, as well as interactive activities of the various projects and programs that are taking place in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. We are happy to let you know that we have around 25 participation from different organizations in the HKH region. And we are also, ICIMOD is also jointly demonstrating some of the activities we are doing in our regional member countries along with our partners. So please do visit these stalls. In addition, we also have ICIMOD stall showcasing various work that we are doing in our regional member countries through the various regional programs. And in addition, we have an ICIMOD app that will be displayed, so please do visit these stalls.